Hello, Hainted Loves. Welcome to Homespun Haints Bonus Edition. I'm Becky.
And I'm Diana.
Ooh, you look spooky today, Diana.
You look spooky yourself, Becky. And you, Hainted Loves, you're looking mighty spooky as well. Ready for some spooky bonus content?
We know you are. We can't see you with our regular eyes, but we can see you with our third eye.
The flesh window that has no window. The face hole that has no hole.
Earlier this week, we heard from Abby of Mysteries of the Past and Present, and she had a really interesting story to tell of finding a Ouija board in the woods outside one of the most haunted cemeteries in Illinois. Not the most haunted cemetery in Illinois. That would be Bachelor's Grove. But this was another cemetery that has a has a spooky name, Blood's Point Cemetery.
Blood's Point.
Blood's Point. I wish my local cemetery was called Blood's Point. That would be so cool. But that's not to say Diana and I haven't found some odd things in cemeteries ourselves. Mm-hmm. Diana, you were the one that posited this to me. You were like, what's some of the weirdest things you've ever found in a cemetery? And I was like,
right?
Isn't everything in a cemetery kind of weird?
Yeah, you're right. The idea of going to a cemetery is going to be not a normal day for most people.
For most people.
For most people. So if you're a cemetery caretaker, maybe what would you consider weird? That's what I'm thinking.
I don't think I've ever found anything quite like a Ouija board. We did find that fig tree growing out of that grave in Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta. That was nice.
That was so neat. I had a good time at Oakland Cemetery, of course. And when we sat down to rest, there was the grave that had a small fig tree growing out of it with nice, ripe mission figs all over it. I think they were mission figs. Were they turkey figs? I don't know.
You're the fig expert.
They're cemetery figs. That's what I know. And I wanted to eat them, and Becky said, no.
No.
Don't eat things you find in cemeteries, Diana.
Yeah, I think that's illegal anyway, right?
Is that a superstition or a law?
Didn't you say it's a law you can't have food for human consumption growing from dead bodies?
Well, okay. So, that's a good question because I was thinking like human biodegradable. Remember when we talked about mushroom coffins and we were talking about human composting? There are tons of laws that say what you can and can't do with human remains. However, I think what they were getting at was they were trying to put the kibosh on people being like, let's just compost people and sell them to farms for fertilizer. I think that's what they're talking about with those type of laws. I don't think it's like you cannot plant a food tree on a grave plot in a cemetery.
I feel like those figs were not for us, Diana. Just something about the whole thing. You definitely wanted to eat one. And I was like, no.
I've never gotten to eat anything that grew in a cemetery before. I'd like to try it.
Okay, well, the following things that I found in a cemetery may one day allow that for you.
Oh, thank goodness. Yes, if I am buried in a cemetery, please plant whatever kind of fruit tree you want on my grave and eat it at will.
You heard it here.
I would love to be inside you after dying.
Wow, is that like reverse necrophilia? Anyway, One thing that we did find that was kind of odd, Diana, when we were in the Nashville City Cemetery, remember we found a grave that was underground?
It had little steps going down to it and a little door and a gate.
Obviously flooded.
Oh, yeah. It was rainy season.
Ugh, it was gross. So there was like steps going down to water, and I would hate to see what that inside of that crypt looked like. But just in case somebody was curious, there was an iron cage over the whole thing. Remember?
Yeah, like the nasty grave water ain't going to keep you out. We're going to put an iron gate here with a lock. Would somebody really want to live there? Like, okay, I'm imagining being as down on my luck as I possibly could. I've been in a situation where I've lived in a car in the past, but being like, okay, I'm going to find shelter in an underground mausoleum that's flooded with corpse water. It takes a certain kind of someone, doesn't it?
I could totally live in a crypt. The corpse water, though, I think would get me.
Right. Having to float in and out of your home, that would be too much.
I've had friends whose apartments have been flooded with raw sewage, and just the sheer amount of shots that you have to get to protect yourself against rabies and typhus and dysentery and all those things afterward.
Everything on the Oregon Trail.
So that's what I would be afraid of. I mean, if you're already in bad enough shape that you have to sleep in a crypt, you probably don't have the health insurance to cover all of that.
Yeah, I lived in New Orleans for years, and every time it rains, it floods because it's under sea level. There's the famous stories of the cemeteries, like the reason that they have above ground graves is because all the bodies would rise up out of the graves when it floods. And so I always kind of pictured like every time I'd walk to work in flooding in my neighborhood, I'd be like, I am walking through corpse water.
You probably were.
I don't own boots. Broke college student and it's hot. I'm wearing flip-flops. Oh well.
Oh, gross. How many parasites did you catch, Diana?
0 that I know of. Could be like the zombie ants with the cordyceps growing out of my head right now. That could be why I'm so strange.
That explains a lot.
It's all toxoplasmosis, my entire personality.
Same goes for me.
I know. Hashtag cat lady life.
Well, I did learn of something interesting, though. These cages that you find over the graves. Because, of course, the first thing I thought when I saw this cage over grave, Diana was, oh, that's to keep people from sleeping in there. My thought was, oh, that's to keep that guy in. You know,
zombie apocalypse. This one dude, this one zombie, we're safe from him.
What did you do that you had to be buried underground and then caged up?
He's going to be the leader of the zombies, like in Land of the Dead. They've got the one guy who's like, I figured this out. Let me lead you, zombies. That was the guy. They're like, no, keep him in. If there's ever a zombie apocalypse, we can't let this guy out. He'll take over. Yeah, everyone else is just going to shamble.
However, a cage over a tomb is a thing.
Oh.
It's called a mort safe.
Mort safe.
Mort safe or a mort cage. And this is actually something you would see more in the UK. Early UK too. So Ireland, while it was still part of the UK, it was definitely a common occurrence because...
Grave robbing?
Yes. In the late 18th century, you had a lot of medical students attending Trinity College and Oxford and schools up in Scotland and things like that. And they had to practice, but they were poor and the school did not provide them with corpses on which to practice.
Oh, at some point in history, it was illegal to do any corpse dissection. Yeah.
Well, it was kind of one of those things that everybody knew it was happening. In fact, I went on a tour of Ireland and they gave a very detailed description of just how they would rob a grave.
Ooh.
It was a profession. They were known as resurrectionists, and they were basically people who were hired by med students to go and rob graves.
To obtain cadavers. They weren't robbing graves like cutting off the mummy's head or stealing your golden scarab. They were literally taking you to the med school.
Yes, they were body snatchers. They would obtain your cadaver, and they would do this in the dead of night. And during the tour, of course, they asked, can we have a volunteer? And my 9-year-old son was like, me. So he went up there and stood there. I have a video of it where they're basically showing how they would dissect his body, like where they would cut him on the skull and down his chest and all that.
Oh, I bet your son thought that was so cool.
Yeah, he was. He's like smiling the whole time. They told me this tour was not for kids. My kids are having a blast.
That's exactly how I would dissect my children.
So anyway, a mort cage was used to protect the grave of your loved one, to make sure it did not become illicitly used for science. I don't know if that's the case of the thing that we found in Nashville or not.
Oh.
Maybe that guy had a reputation. Maybe he told people he was going to haunt them after he died. It's the only one, too, in that entire cemetery.
Yeah, that was the weird part.
There were some other things that were weird. Remember there was that iron fence that went around that collection of tombs? It looked like it had been blasted out on the sides.
It looked like somebody had driven their Jeep over that fence from the inside.
The Jeep of the dead.
A ghost Jeep.
Well, we know iron is also meant to keep ghosts in.
Right. That's why that was so shocking, because it did look like it had been busted out from the inside. But it was also kind of pathetically short. I mean, we could just step over it.
You know, if you're a haint, everything's in a different proportion.
Oh, okay. That's true. You see the little cemetery ghosts, like, hovering just inches off the ground, like slithering.
Right.
Like Voldemort.
I can't get through.
I only know of 2 dimensions in this world.
Well, so that's one weird thing that I've seen in a cemetery.
That's pretty weird.
I have 2 more things, if you'd like to hear them.
I would like to hear them, please.
The second thing is not so much a thing, it's an event. When I was a child, and I think I've told you about this, Diana. When I was a child, I attended a camp every year in Jonesboro, Tennessee, which is touted as being the first European settled town in all of Tennessee. It's old. It's very old. And it has a very old cemetery in it with tombs dating back to the 1600s, which for the South, that's old. Like, we're not Boston here. The summer camp was with the History Museum there in Jonesboro, and we would do fun, child-friendly activities around the History Museum, like find the wagon wheel in the museum, or one day we had somebody with pearl-handled pistols come and show us his collection. You know, child-friendly stuff.
Child-friendly armaments.
The one activity that we did every year, we would have a scavenger hunt that we would do in the cemetery, and we would have to find things such as, who is the youngest person to have died? Who is the oldest person to have died? Which tomb has this? Which tomb has that? Things like that. Again, great activity for 8 and 9-year-olds.
I would have killed to go to this summer camp when I was a kid. Plus, you got to play with sheep. Oh, God.
Oh, that was a different camp.
Oh, my gosh. You had 2 of these?
Yeah.
Oh. All I did was sing Christian songs in a tent at summer camp. It was awful.
I am so sorry.
Yeah. No grapes. No sheep. Jeez.
In hindsight, I actually had a kind of an interesting childhood, even though it was really rural. So we're tromping through these graves, and these were graves where in front of the stone, it was always sunken. The earth was sunken, where the coffin had rotted.
Old
and
ones.
Earth had fallen in. So one day when we were in the cemetery, after we'd done our scavenger hunt and we had found the 11-day-old twins' tomb and the 95-year-old man's tomb, we were doing grave rubbings. And Diana, I know you know what a grave rubbing is. Mm-hmm. For those of you that don't know, this is a very morbid, twisted practice that a lot of us...
It's sweet.
It's sweet. So yeah, you get a sheet of parchment paper or wax paper, some masking tape, and a crayon. Doesn't cost very much money. You go to some random gravestone that you think is pretty. You tape the wax paper onto the gravestone. You take the crayon, you rub the end of the crayon against the wax paper and get an impression of the tombstone's carvings and everything onto the wax paper. And then if you're a real sick fuck, then you go and frame it and hang it in your living room. And I've seen people who do that too.
Well, somebody paid for that and designed that gravestone. Somebody spent, probably if it's that old, spent hours with the chisel and a hammer trying to carve it by hand. Somebody needs to appreciate it. All those stones that are hundreds of years old and then the relatives visit anymore. Now you're giving it new life. You're giving it a purpose. I think it's respectful.
I think that is a very nice way to look at it, Diana. And as an artist, I myself should look at it that way. There actually is a very famous tombstone carver named Eric Gill, but that's because he's also a typographer and he designed all the fonts that are used in the London Underground. But that's a side note for nerds like me. Let's move on.
That's awesome. Did he try them out on graves? Like, do you like this font? Oh, yeah? Okay, yeah. I'm going to propose this to London's underground system.
I don't know. He carved his own gravestone, I think.
That's cool.
Have you heard of the font Gill Sans?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Eric Gill. That's his.
Ooh, Gill Sans. It's a font that originated with tombstones.
Or at least a tombstone carver.
I love it.
All right, so back to tombstone rubbings. We were doing this in this old cemetery, and I found a gravestone for a woman named Elijah, and it was the prettiest headstone in the entire cemetery. Most of them were very plain. They were carved by very poor people, settlers, who were probably in this part of Tennessee illegally, didn't have very much money or resources to create a beautiful stone. But this one headstone for Eliza, it was gorgeous. It wasn't as big as the others, but it had this beautiful floral pattern all the way around the top of the headstone. She had died in 1842, so it was relatively recent by standards of the others there. And it was a windless, hot day in the cemetery. All the other people were off rubbing other tombstones, looking for the ones that had the oldest dates, but I had found Eliza's tomb, and I thought it was so pretty. And I took my wax paper and my masking tape and my purple crayon, and I started rubbing away. And I had just gotten one flower done when the entire wax paper and masking tape flew off the grave and across the cemetery. I thought, that's weird. There's no breeze.
Oh.
Okay, well, maybe I didn't do a very good job taping it down. So little old 9-10-year-old me, I go pick up the wax paper. I can't use that again. So I get out another sheet and I tape it on really well this time, all over the sides. And I start rubbing and I only get maybe 2 or 3 flowers. When the same thing happens, it whips up, hits me in the face, and flies across the cemetery. At this point, I'm just getting mad. And I'm trying to figure out, is this the stone made from some other substance that tape just can't stick to? But it wasn't falling down. It was flying away. So I ran off and I grabbed that wax paper that had flown off this time. And I'm like, we're doing this. And I came back to the tombstone and I was holding it down with one arm, trying to rub with the other hand. And the thing is like coming up and whacking me in the face as I'm trying to rub this tombstone. And I got about halfway done. And the thing's hitting me in the face, and it's thwacking around on the sides. And finally, I stopped. I stood back. The wax paper sat against the tombstone looking at me. And I said, all right, Eliza, I get the message. I'll find somebody else. And I picked up the wax paper, and I crumpled it up, and I threw it away. And I found another tombstone and had absolutely no issues whatsoever.
Ooh.
So that's the second oddest event, I guess. It's not a thing, unless you count this particular gravestone as an odd thing. But it was very distinctive. It stood out from all the others and clearly had a personality.
Wow. And none of your other compatriots for the day had any trouble like you had?
Absolutely not.
Goodness.
I remember mentioning it to a counselor, and they're like, that doesn't make any sense. There's no wind.
There's no wind.
It was like a sticky, hot, breezeless day.
Well, that may be the exception that proves the rule. If Eliza didn't want you rubbing her grave, that means that every time that didn't happen, it was consensual.
Ooh.
Yeah, from beyond the grave, she could come back and be like, no, no, get away. Then that means that other people could too, and they didn't.
Or, I want to put this for you. It wasn't a grave at all. It was some kind of sentient shapeshifter pretending to be a grave.
It was a TARDIS disguised as a grave.
Which is why it looked different from all the others.
That makes total sense. Yeah, it was some kind of alien ship disguised to look like... I think it was definitely a TARDIS, obviously. Or like a strange creature that had the appearance of a gravestone, but it was actually alive.
Yeah, like a troll or something pretending.
Oh, trolls do turn to stone. Ooh. All right, this requires more research. Haunted Loves, have you ever heard of anything that mimics a gravestone in the supernatural world? I want to hear it. Let us know on facebook.com/groups/homespunnates.
Yeah.
If you do have a story, we need to know it. But Becky, what was the number one strangest thing you've seen in a cemetery?
This one wasn't mine sighting. This was actually sighting of a colleague of mine.
Okay.
So, as I've talked about before, I used to be a university professor. Oh, how my life has changed.
Yes.
And the cemetery, Founders Cemetery, which I've taken you to, Diana, in Roswell, the old cemetery where the founders of Roswell are buried. And then there are hundreds of unmarked graves around them, buried around them in the cemetery and then under people's homes surrounding the cemetery. It's an incredibly haunted cemetery. It's just up the street from where I live and where I used to work. But a lot of people visit the cemetery expecting to see things, and then they do. Once upon a time, there's an enormous tree in the cemetery, and the tree was said to be the home of a little ghost girl who liked to watch you as you went through the cemetery, and sometimes she'd play with you, and children would see her a lot. She was in a little white dress. My mom got a photo of her.
Wait, really?
But
why have I never seen this photo?
Well, she keeps losing it. It's a weird thing. The photo will just disappear for years, and then it will just pop up again.
Ooh. Like the ghost in the photo disappears?
No, the photo itself disappears. But I can't see the ghost. She can. And she says that she'll show the photo to multiple people when it appears, and only about 30% of them can see the ghost.
Oh, weird. Do other people say, oh, no, that's obviously a pile of leaves? Or other people just can't see it at all?
They just can't see it at all.
Huh. Kind of like a Dybbuk box smelling like cat pee.
Right. And my mom has always seen more than me. Well, a few years ago, lightning struck the tree.
Oh.
And all that's left is a stump.
And set the ghost free? Maybe? Hopefully?
This colleague of mine told me, because she and I went to the cemetery together once, and she said, I was walking through the cemetery once, and she's like, where that tree was, instead of it being a tree, it was like a giant electrified spider web that spanned 50 feet wide. She said it looked like a portal or something. That's the only way she could describe it. And she was with a friend of hers, and they saw it too.
What?
Yes.
Did they go in?
No.
Would you have gone in?
If I were, I don't know, single, childless, didn't have anybody that would miss me, sure, I'd see what was on the other side.
This dimension sucks. I'm ready for the next one.
Yeah, but I've got too many people depending on me to just
True,
randomly walk through a portal. But she said it was like a giant spider web that was like, but like the strands were like electric, like they were glowing all these different colors. And inside of this, instead of being able to see the other side of the cemetery, it was all black.
Like,
So it was like a giant hole, like a black hole.
spider web over a black hole. They didn't go in. Did they take a freaking photo? Because nobody ever takes a photo of these amazing things.
I don't know. I'll have to find out. I'll ask her.
So many years went by when we didn't have cameras in our pockets.
I know.
So recent. 2013 is when I got my first camera phone, man. I was a little bit late. No, 2011.
You were.
2011.
Up until then, you had to bring your canvas and paints with you.
Yeah, I just had to bring wax paper and a purple crayon and rub on people's faces when I wanted to take a photo of them. Here we go. That looks like you.
Well, so those are the three oddest things that at least I've heard about and encountered in cemeteries.
That's amazing. That's great. So when you suggested telling stories of what we had personally seen that was weird in a cemetery, of course, the fig tree, yeah, that's kind of weird, but also like kind of just sweet. What I could think of, I thought back to everything that had ever occurred in a cemetery or a grave plot in my history. And I think the most interesting thing I saw was the grave marker for the victims of cannibalism at the Alfred Packer site in Lake City, Colorado. They have a couple of bones that look suspiciously human-y.
Ooh.
Just like scattered around the gravesite. I'm sure they're not human bones. They're probably horse bones, but still, they look sort of human-y. It's creepy. It's creepy to the max to see this gravesite with like just random sun-bleached bones scattered around. Like, because this site is like, this tablet is erected in memory of, and then it names all the people who were murdered on this spot early in the year 1874 while pioneering, blah, blah, blah. And then bones. Very creepy, very creepy. But then the other strangest thing that I've seen on a grave site, we actually went to Deadwood, South Dakota, and visited the grave of Calamity Jane.
Ooh, that's right. Yeah.
And Bill Hickok, also known as Wild Bill Hickok. Wild Bill Hickok died the day after my birthday, 1876, in Deadwood. And he was shot because it was the first time he'd ever played cards with his back to the door.
Oh.
Yeah. But Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane, there's like a sordid love triangle thing going on with them. And so she wanted to be buried right next to him, even though they were never really together in life. I went to visit both of their graves when I was in Deadwood, and there was the thing that kind of like threw me about these graves is that there was so much commercialized items on the graves. Like, you expect people to put little stones on the graves for various religious traditions, little coins. On Wild Bill Hickok, of course, he was shot in the back while playing poker, and that's where they get the phrase dead man's hand, was the hand that he was holding. So people put on his grave, of course, playing cards and bullets and cigarettes, And somebody actually put a lighter there just so he could light all the cigarettes that somebody left him, which I thought was sweet.
Very considerate.
But then there were so many things that were like, why would you go buy that from a touristy gift shop and put it on a grave? That I don't get it. So like there's one on Calamity Jane's grave that's just like a little polished rock that has the word peace engraved on it.
Okay.
And then on Bill Hickok's grave, somebody's left their business card. It's a business card for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security.
What?
Like, what?
Maybe they want a job in the afterlife. They want him to hook them up.
He's an outlaw. You know? I mean,
That
like,
maybe this guy's like tired of following the law. He's like, when I die, I want to be shooting him up with Bill Hickok.
in life, Homeland Security, in death, Wild, Wild West. And then right next to it, there's like a obviously commercialized arrowhead that's been carved. And then right next to that, there's one of those little decorative stone from a gift shop that's painted. And it's got a witchy boot on it. And it says if the shoe fits.
This is so weird.
Right? That's what I was confused about. And then there was another like little old school looking calling card.
Oh, okay. I guess that kind of makes sense.
Literally has the words old school on it.
Oh my God. Jeez, people.
Very on the nose.
When in Deadwood.
It shocked me how commercialized all of this was. The lighter, the cigarettes were all like commercial cigarettes. They weren't like hand-rolled cigarettes or anything that Bill Hickok would have ever had. There's some playing cards there. Not all Ace of Spades, but many. And then just a lot of little coins. Do you know what the coins mean?
Yeah, that's actually usually used for military.
Well, he was shot.
It's a way that vets will honor one another. There's a code, like different coins mean different things. I don't know all of it.
Well, every single type of denomination of American coin is on Bill Hickok's grave on this day. And remember, there's somebody who works at the cemetery that has to clean all this stuff up every day.
Why? Why not just leave it like Jim Morrison's grave?
Well, if it blows off, then the groundskeepers get pissed off because they have to mow. They don't want to mow over a bunch of quarters and rocks. That was definitely the weirdest thing I've ever seen on a grave was a business card from Department of Homeland Security.
Actually, I think that's weirder than a Ouija board because the Ouija board, you can explain, like somebody was trying to contact the dead.
We've brought a Ouija board into a cemetery ourselves, Becky. We could have easily lost it.
Oh my gosh, that was weird when it started moving on its own.
That's what Ouija boards are supposed to do.
I know, but the thing is, each of us thought the other person was doing it until we came back and told one another. And then the planchette disappeared for 5 months. I just found it last weekend.
You just found the planchette?
Yeah.
Oh.
It was in the pocket of my other pants.
Same thing happened to the planchette that Abby didn't find.
Right.
Right. They brought the Ouija board into the cemetery. The planchette disappears.
It's probably in somebody's pants. That's where mine
was. It's not called a pant set.
Planchette.
Planchette pant set. Oh my God. We're going to market this as the next like business power suit. Planchette pant set.
Woohoo! Yeah. You want that interview to go well, you know what you gotta wear.
You want a woman president? This is what you need. Planchette pant set.
You know how to get things done with the living and the dead.
All right, well, we have a design project. We have a list of strange things we've spotted in cemeteries. And I think we're also having a spooky day.
Homespun Haints is hosted by Becky Kielimnik and Diana Doty, and produced by Homespun Haints Media LLC. Editing and music by Becky Kielimnik. Show notes by Diana Doty. If you have a ghost story and you'd like to be considered as a guest for this podcast, please visit our website at homespunhaints.com/submit.